Throughout her voyage to New York, Marie Empress wore all black. Even her face was covered by a small black veil. Her stewardess thought that the beautiful 35-year-old woman might have been a war widow, but she soon learned that she was a famous vaudeville performer and silent film star. It was October 1919, and Empress was traveling to New York City on the Cunard liner SS Ardunia. Born in Birmingham, England on March 26, 1884, Mary Ann Louise Taylor began performing in vaudeville as a male impersonator. She quickly adopted the stage name Marie Empress and soon moved into singing, dancing, and acting. Marie quickly became a favorite in the London music hall scene and stages in New York. As her popularity grew, she soon began starring in films. Between 1915 and 1916, she starred in at least 9 films, often playing daring vamps or femme fatales. Her public image seemed to fit her mysterious and seductive on-screen persona. While little is known about her personal life, gossip columns portrayed a tumultuous life of lurid affairs, possible drug use, and unexplained scars. It's unlikely that most of these stories are true, but it's clear that Marie led a private life and seemed to enjoy feeding her mysterious reputation. In 1902, she married a dentist named William Horton, but the couple separated in 1906 and legally divorced in 1918, when her ex-husband claimed that she had become overly infatuated with the stage. Marie was no stranger to travel, performing frequently in both London and New York. So by 1919, she was very used to crossing the Atlantic by ocean liner. In October of that year, she booked passage on the Cunard liner Ardunia for an 11-day voyage from Liverpool to New York. Built for the Pacific Steam Navigation Company at the Harland and Wolff shipyards in Belfast, the Ardunia was launched on October 2, 1913, and sailed her maiden voyage on February 19, 1914. The intermediate ocean liner came in at 15,507 gross registered tons and measured 550 feet or 167 meters in length, with a beam of 67.3 feet or 20.5 meters. She was powered by 2 triple expansion steam engines and a low-pressure steam turbine that drove 3 propellers to achieve a service speed of 15 knots. She could carry up to 896 passengers and offered somewhat standard accommodations for liners of the time. After just 2 voyages, the Ardunia was chartered to the Cunard Line. She mostly carried passengers through World War I, but she was also occasionally used to transport troops. Her most notable passenger during the war was Quentin Roosevelt, the son of U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt. Quentin was tragically killed in aerial combat over France on July 14, 1918, the only child of a U.S. president to ever die in combat. In October 1919, Marie Empress's voyage on the Ardunia started out routine. While the actress mostly kept to herself, she appeared to be in a good mood. Her stewardess told reporters, "She would make little jokes when I sewed the rips in her clothes. She seemed just like any other lady who was making the crossing, except she was better looking and better humored." Another passenger remarked that she was as lively as a cricket and was looking forward with enthusiasm to another season among her American friends. On the last night of the voyage, a stewardess brought Marie's dinner to her stateroom, number 480. When she returned to clear the dishes and turned down her bed at 6:30, Marie asked her to bring sandwiches later that evening, a routine she stuck to throughout the voyage. At 9:30, the stewardess returned to deliver the sandwiches. She knocked lightly on the cabin door, but when no one answered, she let herself in. The cabin was empty. She thought little of Marie's absence, assuming that she had probably just gone for a walk. She placed the sandwiches on a table and left the room to continue serving her other passengers. The night passed like any other. The next morning, when the stewardess returned to Marie Empress's room, she found it empty. The sandwiches had not been touched, and the bed had not been slept in. The cabin appeared to be completely untouched from the night before. A thorough search of the Yardunia showed no signs of the actress. It was as if she had simply vanished. Stranger still, the stewardess seemed to be the last person to see Marie Empress when she left her alone in her cabin at 6:30 that night. No other passenger, officer, or crew member recalled seeing her anywhere on the ship. Marie was someone people generally tended to notice. She was beautiful and dressed more dramatically than most other women on board. Stateroom 480 had a door to the interior passageway and a single 13-inch porthole, far too small for any adult to squeeze through. How she could have managed to slip away unnoticed is a mystery. When the Yardunia arrived in New York, reporters were quick to pick up the story of the missing actress. Speculation ran wild over what could have happened to Marie Empress. Stories allege that she donned a disguise and snuck off the ship in New York to begin a new life out of the spotlight. Others claimed that the disappearance was some kind of dramatic publicity stunt. People quickly picked up on her past as a male impersonator and alleged that she donned a crisp sailor's uniform, or a grimy shirt and jeans of a fireman, or maybe just a simple suit and hat. But there was never any evidence to support any of these claims, and it was soon pointed out that no one ever claimed Marie's belongings, including a trunk full of clothing and personal mementos. Marie Empress never made a dramatic reappearance. With no trace of the actress, newspapers and gossip columns soon moved on. One of the last mentions of Marie Empress came on November 8, 1921, when Mary Ann Horton, Marie's legal name, was officially declared dead as of approximately October 25, 1919. What happened to Marie Empress on the Yardunia remains a mystery. Despite media speculation and unreliable eyewitness accounts, what really happened that night in Stateroom 480 will probably always remain unknown. Marie Empress was quickly forgotten. All of her films are now considered lost media. There are no recordings of her singing. All that remains are a few photographs and speculative articles that report on a persona that was never entirely accurate. The real Marie Empress, Mary Ann Louisa Taylor, may as well have never existed. Her life, let alone her final moments on the Yardunia, will be forever lost to the mysteries of time. Captain Claudio Kuslich was no stranger to rough weather on the North Atlantic. Before captaining the SS Leonardo da Vinci, he served as vice captain on the SS Michelangelo. During one particularly brutal voyage in April 1966, the great liner was battered by a series of storms. Just when it seemed that they had survived the worst of it, the Michelangelo was struck head-on by a massive rogue wave that caved in her forward superstructure, killing 2 passengers and 1 crew member. The violent encounter left 50 people injured, including Vice Captain Kuslich, who suffered a series of fractures in his left arm. The Michelangelo survived the ordeal and limped back to New York for repairs, and Kuslich was soon promoted by the Italian lines to captain. By 1973, he was master of the SS Leonardo da Vinci. In late March of that year, the Italian liner faced a difficult voyage that no doubt reminded him of his time on the Michelangelo, as they were battered by rough weather and heavy seas. But after a challenging night, Captain Kuslich was pleased with how his ship and his crew weathered the storm. That was until he learned that a passenger, one of the most noteworthy men on board, had vanished from his ship during the night. Henry Endicott Stebbins was a career Foreign Service officer with the United States. Born in 1905 in Milton, Massachusetts, Henry attended Harvard before joining the Foreign Service on July 1, 1939 as a Class 8 officer. He was soon named Vice Consul to Ambassador Joseph P. Kennedy in the United Kingdom. He remained with the London Embassy for over 10 years. In 1945, he met his future wife, Barbara Jennifer Worthington. He served several roles through the 1950s, and in 1959, he was named ambassador to Nepal by President Eisenhower. In 1966, he was appointed ambassador to Uganda by President Johnson. When he earned the appointment, his 89-year-old mother was interviewed by a local paper. She said that she was happy with the appointment, but she would rather he be a street sweeper in Milton because, at least that way, he'd be home. In 1969, Henry E. Stebbins retired from the Foreign Service at the age of 65. He moved back to Milton with his wife Barbara, and the couple filled their time with travel. In March 1973, they booked a voyage on the SS Leonardo da Vinci, bound for a vacation in Italy, with stops in various ports in southern Europe. The couple enjoyed a relatively routine voyage, only occasionally interrupted by rough weather. Only a couple days away from their first port of call in Lisbon, Henry and Barbara took a walk on deck in the early morning hours of Wednesday, March 28. The couple booked separate cabins for the voyage, and after some time on deck, Barbara said goodbye to her husband and retired to her cabin. Later that day, she went to Henry's cabin so the two could go to lunch together as they had done every other day of the voyage. By this point, their routine was well set. But when she entered his cabin, Henry Stebbins was nowhere to be found. His watch and other valuables were spread on his dressing table. His bed had not been slept in, and it did not appear that he had undressed. She quickly reported her missing husband to the ship's officers, and the crew immediately conducted a massive search of the 33,000-ton Italian liner. But it was clear to Captain Kuslich and his officers what likely happened to the man. The SS Leonardo da Vinci launched on December 7, 1958 to replace the ill-fated Andrea Doria, was not a flawless ship. Like the Andrea Doria and her sister ship the Cristoforo Colombo, the Da Vinci was prone to rolling heavily in rough weather. While modified and improved, her design still closely resembled the flawed Andrea Doria. The night Henry Stebbins went missing was challenging for the Da Vinci, so much so that her arrival in Lisbon was delayed by a full day. The great white liner rolled, sometimes violently, with the heavy seas. It was nothing that put the ship in any real danger, but for someone walking on deck, especially an older man, it was not hard to imagine what might have happened. By the time the disappearance was reported, the Da Vinci had traveled approximately 300 miles. Captain Kuslich knew that even if they turned back, it would be virtually impossible to find anyone in the water, and it was highly unlikely anyone could survive that long in the open ocean. So the Da Vinci continued to Lisbon, where they reported the loss to local authorities. The story of Henry Stebbins is a tragic reminder that the sea can be a dangerous place. One moment, he was surrounded by opulent Italian luxury. The next, he was plummeting into the abyss. While we don't know for sure what happened, it's not hard to imagine the horrors of his final moments. During a routine voyage in February 1936, the Bremen radioed the North German Lloyd office in New York ahead of their arrival with troubling news. A young American passenger had vanished from the German luxury liner. 25-year-old Adolph Cotton was a typical American traveler. A recent Princeton graduate, the young archaeologist traveled to London to study with the Department of Archaeology at the British Museum. Born in Trenton, New Jersey, Adolph's father, Henry Cotton, was the medical director at the New Jersey State Hospital in Trenton. Before his death in 1933, Dr. Cotton gained an international reputation for his experimental surgeries to treat mental illness and his, frankly abhorrent eugenic theories. His horrifying work warrants its own video, but that's a job for another channel. Thank God. In letters to his mother Della and brother Henry, a doctor at Johns Hopkins, both of which he remained very close to, especially after his father's death, Cotton seemed to be in good spirits. He told them that he enjoyed his time in London, and he was looking forward to seeing them again soon. Before boarding the Bremen, he cabled his mother, telling her when he was due to arrive in New York, and asked her to meet him there at the pier. He booked a tourist class ticket on the Bremen and occupied cabin 631. At the time, the 51,656-ton Bremen was one of the most popular liners crossing the Atlantic. Launched on August 16, 1928, she sailed her maiden voyage on July 16, 1929, garnering international acclaim for innovative design, luxurious accommodations, and impressive speed. Her 27-knot service speed quickly captured the Blue Ribbon, the record for the fastest Atlantic crossing, stealing it away from Britain's Mauretania. By 1936, Hitler's rise in Germany and its far-right fascist ideology began to erode the popularity of the German ocean liners, especially after a 1935 law required German ships to fly the Nazi flag. Bremen was the target of numerous protests and saw many high-profile incidents in which badass protesters snuck on board and ripped down the Nazi flag. But in early 1936, only months before the debut of Cunard's Queen Mary, the Bremen and her sister ship Europa remained a popular option, especially for American tourists. Adolph Cotton was exactly the type of traveler these liners catered to, especially as immigration laws in the US limited the number of people allowed to enter the country. Third-class spaces, once tailored to European immigrants, had been converted on many liners to the new tourist class, directly appealing to students and tourists traveling to Europe. Cotton traveled alone. Shortly after boarding the ship in Southampton, he introduced himself to his cabin steward, Lorenz Hoffman. The two spoke for a bit while Cotton took a robe from his suitcase and laid it on his bed alongside the overcoat that he had been wearing. The next afternoon, not long after leaving Cherbourg, Hoffman paid another visit to Adolph's cabin. Strangely, the young man was nowhere to be found. His robe and overcoat remained on the bed, exactly where he had left them during their brief conversation the previous day. His bags remained in the room, with nothing else unpacked. Hoffman reported the missing passenger, and the crew carried out a thorough search of the massive ship. But no trace of Cotton was ever found. On February 9th, news of the missing passenger was radioed to New York. His mother and brother raced to the city to meet the Bremen and collect Adolph's belongings. The strange disappearance baffled his family and authorities. He didn't seem to be in any frame of mind to do anything rash, and it seemed unlikely that he could have fallen overboard without anyone noticing. The weather that day was perfectly calm. But one conversation with a fellow passenger seemed to stick out. While on the tender that carried passengers to the Bremen from Southampton, another young tourist, Mariano Pamantuan, a student visiting from the Philippines, saw that Cotton was carrying a camera and struck up a conversation. He said, "I suppose you're going to New York, as we are all going." Cotton responded, "Oh, I don't know about that." This brief conversation led officials to believe that Cotton left the ship shortly after boarding while they were stopped to take on passengers in Cherbourg. But if this was the case, why would he leave all of his belongings in cabin 631? If he intended to only go ashore briefly and return to the ship but somehow missed it, why wouldn't he have contacted his family? The young man was only beginning an academic career that he was passionate about. The young man was only beginning an academic career that he seemed to love. He was close with his family and seemed eager to see them again. It's hard to believe he would have disappeared voluntarily. It was as if Adolph Cotton simply vanished into thin air. He was never seen again after that fateful voyage, and the mystery of his disappearance soon faded from memory. Charles Whittlesey was a war hero. He was awarded the Medal of Honor for Valor, one of the first 3 American soldiers to be awarded for their actions in World War I. In 1919, a film was made about his heroism leading the Lost Battalion. He acted as a pallbearer at the burial of the unknown soldier in Arlington. And on November 26, 1921, he vanished from the liner SS Taloa. His disappearance wasn't an accident. Charles White Whittlesey was born on January 20th, 1884 in Florence, Wisconsin, a small mining town in the northeast corner of the state, not far from the Michigan border. His father, Frank Whittlesey, built a prosperous lumber business in the area that boomed when iron ore was discovered, fueling a thriving mining business. Charles was the second of 6 children, but his older brother Frank died shortly after birth, making Charles the oldest surviving son. He was always thin and somewhat frail, and never took to sports or intense physical activities. Instead, he preferred books and the great outdoors. When he wasn't reading, he was exploring the stunning natural beauty that surrounded his hometown. But tragedy was never far away, and in June 1894, Charles' sister Anna fell ill and passed away. She was only 8 years old. His brother Russell only narrowly survived the same illness. That same year, his father accepted a job with the new General Electric Corporation and moved him and his family to Pittsfield, Massachusetts. Charles quickly came to appreciate the beautiful countryside of his new home, and he quickly gained popularity for his quiet thoughtfulness and quick wit. He made friends easily. He excelled in school and went on to attend Williams College, where he was voted 3rd brightest man in his class. While in school, he wrote that the purpose of education was learning to judge correctly, to think clearly, to see and to know the truth, and to attain the faculty of pure delight in the beautiful. After graduation, Charles enrolled at Harvard Law School and graduated in 1908. He moved to New York and soon formed a law firm with a former classmate. He quickly gained a reputation as a skilled lawyer. In 1914, when war broke out in Europe, Charles strongly agreed with the United States' neutrality. He was staunchly opposed to war and felt that it was morally reprehensible for a country to send young men to their deaths. But like most men of his class and station, he felt that it was his moral duty to serve if he was called up. To his dismay, the United States grew closer and closer to war over the coming months and years. When the Lusitania was sunk by a German U-boat, Charles recognized that war was inevitable. Finally, in 1917, only a month after the United States declared war on Germany, Charles Whittlesey received his call-up notice and reported for 90-day officer training in the United States Army on May 14, 1917. He performed his duties admirably and soon shipped out to the Western Front as a captain in the 308th Infantry 77th Division, known as the Metropolitan Division because it was overwhelmingly made up of New Yorkers, primarily from the Lower East Side. Charles proved a skilled officer, and he was soon promoted to major in September 1917 and placed in command of a battalion. On October 2, 1918, the 77th Division prepared for a major offensive against a heavily fortified segment of the German line in the Meuse-Argonne region. The operation was part of a wider push by American forces to overwhelm the Germans and deal a decisive victory that would help bring an end to the war. Whittlesey, leading a battalion of 554 soldiers, pushed forward through a ravine, and by the end of the day, they reached their intended position. But to their horror, the units on their flanks failed to move forward, leaving Whittlesey's battalion completely on their own. Soon, German machine guns positioned on the surrounding 200-foot bluffs pinned them down. Cut off from food, water, and other supplies, the men desperately fought off repeated German attacks and sniper fire as they desperately waited for reinforcements. Their plight soon reached newspapers back in the US, hungry for stories of war heroes to help bolster support for the war. The unit was quickly dubbed the Lost Battalion, though they were technically never actually lost. On October 7th, the Germans sent a blindfolded American POW into the unit with a message begging them to surrender. It ended by saying, "We envy you." Newspapers reported that Whittlesey replied, "You go to hell." But this was almost certainly made up. Whittlesey always maintained that he gave no response at all, and ordered any white sheets that could be mistaken for a signal of surrender to be taken down. After days of hell and miscommunication, Whittlesey wrote a desperate message with their position and sent it by a carrier pigeon named Cher-Ami to the American forces. He didn't believe that the pigeon would make it, but somehow it did, and Whittlesey's forces were finally relieved, sending the Germans into retreat. Of the 554 troops under Whittlesey's command, 107 died, 63 went missing, and 190 were wounded. Charles Whittlesey was hailed as a hero. He returned to the US in December 1918 and was quickly awarded the Medal of Honor for his valor in the war, one of the first 3 awarded after World War I. His story was a major hit, propelling him to fame virtually overnight. In 1919, a hit film was released recounting the story of the Lost Battalion. He was barraged with requests for speeches, parades, and an onslaught of other honors that increasingly felt hollow. Like so many others, Charles was profoundly changed by the horrors he experienced during the war. He kept in contact with many of the survivors from his unit and agonized over the difficulties these men faced once they returned home. Friends, family, and colleagues noticed that his wit and quiet energy seemed to have hollowed away. In November 1921, he acted as a pallbearer at the burial of the unknown soldier at Arlington National Cemetery, one of the many ceremonies that had left him so distraught. Only a few days later, he booked a voyage from New York to Havana. On November 26, 1921, he boarded the SS Taloa, part of the United Fruit Company's Great White Fleet of cargo passenger liners. During his first night aboard, he dined at the captain's table and seemed to be in good spirits. After dinner, he spent some time in the smoking room, and then he retired to his cabin. Charles Whittlesey was never seen again. In his room, there were a series of letters addressed to his parents, his brothers, his uncle, and several of his close friends, along with instructions for the captain on what to do with his belongings. Shortly before the voyage, Charles had a will prepared, leaving everything to his mother. He left the famous letter sent to him by the Germans begging him to surrender to his friend and law partner George McMurtry. His final moments were characteristically thoughtful. So many disappearances at sea are deeply mysterious, but others are painfully straightforward. Charles Whittlesey never wanted to go to war, but he answered when he received his nation's call. He never could have imagined that the nightmare he was subjected to would become a tool used to glorify a war that took everything from him and so many others. A lie that left millions dead and promised to kill millions more. A lie that he could no longer live with. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video interesting, support the channel with a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd like to give a special shout out to my supporters on Patreon and my channel members. Their support helps keep the channel afloat. Alright crew, that's all I've got. Until the next one, be nice to people.